There was something else happening besides Empower this week in Houston, CERAWeek. Mark, give us the download on what happened at CERA.
Well, what's happened so far is I think you're seeing the new iteration or generation of CERAWeek, which is, been pretty clearly divided along the line of politics, where you've got the traditionalists that are now, urging more balance in the transition versus, the more progressive side of the conversation, and politics is right in the middle of it. There's been a lot of interesting kind of revelations and data points and forecasts put out this week.
It seems almost interesting that it's really lines driven down political points on two fronts. One is Ukraine. Those, it really is like the Russia and OPEC. They're not here this week. And that's a Ukraine story. But at the same time, it's sort of the greenies. Europe clearly is leading in the transition. And that includes a lot of, Europe and Middle East, I'm not even going to count. But it's almost similar. You've got sort of the big U.S.-based firms that are the loudest on moving forward on not being as aggressive on the green transition, which is interesting because Shell and BP are not as aggressive in their comments. What say you, Mark or Colin or Chuck?
So are you saying that really your political divide is bifurcated into Russia, Ukraine, geopolitics, and then green versus traditional energy?
Which is usually a Europe versus U.S. kind of story in some ways.
It actually is. I've never thought about it in that framing, but that's kind of an interesting way to think about it because we never really think about it as U.S. versus Europe.
Yeah, and underneath all of that, recently I saw a characterization of Europe versus U.S. as regards to how we think about incentives for transition. We have the IRA in the U.S. We've seen more punitive things proposed in Europe recently, and so it's described as carrots in the U.S. and sticks in Europe. And Patrick Pouillon, who runs Total Energies this morning, I believe, or yesterday, said during his discussion with Dan Yergin is that what Europe needs is to really simplify the framework and the incentives. The U.S. is much more attractive in terms of making those kind of bridge and transition type investments.
I know that is true, but if you look at some of the self-consumption laws in Europe, that's almost being rolled out across Europe wide, and even in the UK, which is not Europe anymore, FYI to some people. They're actually more progressive, and they're incentivizing consumers and businesses to be able to take advantage of sort of the green transition by using renewables. And California, who's arguably leading on the transition, even though they're crazy AF, those fuckers are crazy. They're not even they're struggling with FERC and with California regulators on how to implement similar laws that Europe already has on the books.
Two things. One, we wouldn't be having this discussion about Europe, or we'd be having a different tone if we hadn't had the warmest winter in Europe since 1881. So that's number one.
Global warming actually bailed us out.
Global warming bailed out Europe, and
Patron bailed me out earlier today. So is that similar?
Yeah, probably so. But we've talked about this on BDE. I think it was totally unappreciated by the U.S. markets that 20% of the earnings of the S&P 500 come out of Europe. And had we actually seen a normal to slightly cold winter there, I think we would be talking economic recession in Europe. So that's number one. Number two, Colin, I hate to say this, we're having this wonderful Empower event at this beautiful facility, but CERAWeek's reusable, recycled plastic bottles so that everyone has water from the water fountain far out trumps any cup I've seen here.
Oh, that's a fail, just saying, man. Dude. That's a fail.
Huge fail on Digital Wildcatter's part.
No, I'm saying it's a fail on CERAWeek. It's bullshit.
Yeah,
brainwash.
We dropped the ball with the recyclable bottles, so we'll make a mental note of that.
I ranked the CERA reusable water containers right up there with the UN's holiday card. It's like, that's all it is.
What's funny about CERAWeek, and going back to be serious for a moment, is the US-based energy companies are telling Europe, I told you so, though. And part of it is you're lucky as fuck that you had a warm winter because you're about to be in some big pain in the coming years.
And we've seen the European counterparts, namely Shell and BP, either say, we're going to stop this notion that letting our oil production decline, Shell, last week, or BP tapping the brakes a little bit on its own decline as it relates to, investor pushback on their shares underperformance.
So I did text with Wael, CEO of Shell, earlier because we're supposed to get together later.
Hold on,
hopefully
that
I'll
is,
get some
that
comments
is
off
a
the books.
name drop on par with the Chuck Yates name drop. Well played, Kirk. Well played, buddy.
No warning for that either.
Hell yeah, man.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I said what I
well, I'm
had to say.
texting
I
with
said
the
I'd get
CEO.
back to you off the record once I got some insights off the record. And then it'll be on the record because everyone listens to BDE, as
There we
we've
go.
proven time and time again.
Hey, Mark, you sent around a tweet today from Colonel Drake. Hit that real quick,
Yeah,
because this is fascinating.
there's been a growing conversation around the degradation of Permian inventory. This focuses on some flow LLC analysis. Tom, is it Lawfrey? Looking at Delaware Basin top decile wells in 2022 compared to the same grouping of wells, top decile wells in 2017, we've seen a 15% degradation. And so a lot of the comments that we've heard this week as well from CEOs is really acknowledging that this, we're seeing the end of the runway, if you will, for tier one and the easier growth that comes from that. I just thought it was pretty interesting because if you think back to 2017, we were just getting started in terms of incorporating and integrating a lot of good, just basic kind of analytics into making subsurface decisions and predictions on well spacing and completion design. And you've got much more of that theoretically involved in decisions in the 2022 sample of wells, yet they're 15% poorer. Tells you nothing changes the rock.
This has opened up conversations online about international offshore conventional exploration. I saw a tweet the other day that was asking, like, hey, when do you really start to see capital flow into offshore conventional projects? Is it 5 years, 10 years? And I think something interesting that we saw this week was with North Slope, Conoco asset. Mark just told me something backstage. It's like something crazy on change.org. Like there's a petition with like a
Yeah,
million.
just circling back to the M&A discussion, I mean, good dirt is good dirt. I mean, that's what we're seeing here with the fact that all these guys that came in, especially from California, you fucks. No, I'm just kidding. Especially with all these technology companies saying, hey, I can use AI and all this to increase your productivity. But the reality is good dirt is good dirt, right? And will that make M&A activity even more interesting to watch over the next year?
One quick point, and then go to M&A activity real quick. I want to magnify this. It's down 15% from 2017. If you look at 2000, call it 10 or 12, somewhere in there through 17, the average IP of a well was up 40% a year, right? In 17, it was up 17%. What was interesting, though, is Exxon and Chevron were late to the game drilling in the Permian. If you take out the Chevron and the Exxon wells drilled in 2017, because they have the best acreage there, right? If you take those wells out, the average well was actually down 8% in 2017. So it's even worse. The great acreage of those two companies is making this bad statistic even worse.
Well, not even on that, but I mean, you look at the difference in business models between PE-backed operators and the majors like Shell and Chevron. I mean, if you look at a breakdown from wells drilled in 2019, I think in the Permian Basin, the majors were responsible for like 5% of them. So they don't just go burn through their acreage like some of these PE-backed companies do, where they'll go drill and try to provide, prove value through the drill bit and then flip the asset. And so they'll sit on that asset for a long time and develop it over a much longer time horizon too. So that's interesting. I didn't think about backing them out of that data set and seeing how that actually affects the
It's been a huge drop from, call it, 16 to today.
So what does this all mean to kind of tie it up? You were referring to Willow Project, which is Conoco's big to be determined, right? It depends upon administration approval on the North Slope. It's $8 billion for 600 million barrels of reserve potential. It's in the National Petroleum Reserve. Ryan Lance addressed it, I think, yesterday. He said, look, we keep down this path and we've got shale degradation upon us. We're heading back to the 70s or 80s, meaning we're going to get, we're going to have to backfill from somewhere else, the implication being not the U.S. And so I think it's even elevates and amplifies the importance and the notion of these big conventional projects that we can bring online. I mean, Willow was projected to contribute at plateau 180,000 barrels a day.
I want to go on a slight, unless you want to continue to stop, but I've got a tangent that I think is real interesting.
So long as somebody brings up caribou, because we're in Alaska, but go ahead.
No, this is a tech point. I was at HPE this week, and one of their experts on the guy that builds out HPE's cloud and data centers, we were talking about ChatGPT and all this. He was making a comment, and he focused on energy too, but he was making this comment that in the future, companies are going to be valued by their data because the insights from data, and we capture so much data. And I was like, well, let's look at oil and gas. I mean, all oil and gas companies are basically valued on their reserves, but a molecule is a molecule. I was like, a data is not the same data. I mean, it's the insights that come from the data. And he's like, just watch out. And we've been talking about, since I got into this business in 2010, where it's like, data is the new oil. It might finally be here.
I had a pretty popular tweet where I was like, oil is the new oil, it turns out. But actually,
I think oil
saw
will always
someone
be
on
the new
Twitter yesterday talking about this 15% decline in IP from wells in the Permian. And he's like, so much for big data and analytics and artificial intelligence making more production. I'm like, you can't change the rock, right? And of course, you can focus on, how much oil you're actually recovering and different well design and construction and internal efficiency across operations. But, at the end of the day, you start chewing through the best rock, you got to expect that you're going to have production declines. And I also think that it's a grift to be like, some of these companies, they start high grading their assets. And so, $110 oil, this tier 2 rock is now categorized as tier 1. I think the tier that you're determining your asset, how it's ranked should be on the rock itself and not just by what's economic in a price environment.
I think in absolute terms, that's right. We're not going to see kind of a regeneration of tier 1 performance because we've applied better technology and bigger data and analytics to poorer rock. I mean, the rock is inherently limited. It also makes the margin for error smaller. So I think what big data can provide in terms of prediction is very helpful from a capital avoidance standpoint, where you don't overdevelop and overcapitalize crappy rock. Everybody's had the experience where we've got the pad that we kind of trial and error by brute force. You put $200 million in the ground and then you find out it's sub-economic. And so I think technology and data are going to be even more important to make those at the margin decisions for tier 2 and tier 3.
I remember an investment committee meeting at Kane. Somebody walked in and they were talking about the rock. And
are you still at Kane, or is that a different story?
Do you not read the Wall Street Journal?
That was great. Prominent businessman.
Chuck
he
Yates.
hasn't snuck
How
into
many
their computer
people have
yet.
been fired on this couch? A lot here.
100% hit rate over there for being ran
How
out.
many people have had it written up in the Wall Street Journal where it says Chuck Yates leaves the firm? I demanded a retraction. I was like, I was fired. But no, so we're sitting in the investment committee meeting and we're talking about the acreage, and somebody asked the question, is it tier 1? Is it tier 2? And the next question was, are we buying or selling?
So I was talking to, speaking, I'm going to go to Europe for a second. I was talking to one of my Financial Times Financial Times buddies. So speaking of CERAWeek, and this week, what's funny, it's like they're giving hell because the US-based energy, oil and gas companies were against Biden's IRA. But I'm reading this, and in the IRA, it gives like they're going to pay $85 a ton for CO2 reduction, $185 a ton for direct air capture, which I think is complete bullshit. And I've looked at every direct air capture company out there. I think it's a freaking snake oil. But I was thinking about this business model. I was looking at Denbury. I'm like, these guys have massive CO2 capabilities, and they're using it to make money on flooding. But if they get paid $85 a ton, and it's projected over the next few years, they're going to be putting up to 50 million tons of CO2 in the ground. So not only are they making money off EOR, but they get an extra $4.2 billion on top of that in tax credits.
I talked to the CMP guy.
Investment advice?
I talked to the CMP guy. He's like, dude, this is amazing. He's like, we produce oil and gas. We'll create the carbon. Then we'll capture it, we'll inject it, and we'll get paid.
And then we'll mine Bitcoin on it.
It's a full loop, producing and then re-injecting it. So
unbelievable.
Don't
right,
worry,
we
man.
got- we
Denbury
gotta-
will figure out a way to fuck it up.
I didn't want to say that, but
we got to
I'm just
wrap
saying the idea.
We got to wrap this up, but it wouldn't be a true ending to Big Digital Energy if we didn't end with a finger of the week. So, do we have a finger of the
Damn.
week lined up? Who's getting the finger?
All
Chuck,
right,
you
if
got
not,
something?
I'll go. I tweeted this out earlier in the week. At Digital Wildcatters, in the men's bathroom stall, we have dude wipes. And dude wipes are the greatest thing on the planet. But there's some idiot in the office that leaves the bags open and they dry out. So I had to hang a sign in the stall that says, please, if you leave the bag open, the dude wipes will dry out. Stop doing this, asshole.
Okay.
So that person, whoever they are, we're going to find you. You get the finger of the week.
Hey, Chuck, it could be someone on this couch since it's in the Digital Wildcatters.
Well, I mean, there's
HQ.
other companies in there. So if they're at DW, I don't think anyone from DW is that dumb to do that. So anyways, whoever that is, they're getting finger of the week. So gentlemen, appreciate y'all coming and doing this live here today. Appreciate anyone that stayed back to listen to us
Both
ramble
of y'all.
up here.
We really appreciate
I
that.
count two. I count
two of you.
3, 4. Thank
So,
y'all.
all right, guys. If y'all haven't checked out our podcast, Big Digital Energy, we do it once a week. It goes out Tuesday at 6 a.m. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. So these guys up here always have great insight into the energy industry and the market. So definitely check it out. And if you enjoy it, share it with a friend. And I hope y'all enjoy the rest of Empower. I think that they are having a workshop up at the Cashmere Lounge on level 3. If y'all haven't been up there, really cool spot. And they'll be doing some workshops, Q&A, and I think the next workshop starts at 12:30 if I'm not mistaken. So make sure to run up there and check that out. All right. Thank you, guys.
Peace.